What's up, everyone? Welcome to an all-new episode. This is episode number 16 of One-on-Ones with Mike and Paul. We started this to lead into our season back in April, May-ish, and the purpose of this was to field the questions from our fans around the nuances of the PLL's formation, to the way the business is going now, to just, frankly, as we've received some friendly banter, and as we look into the final week of the regular season, we have a few things to discuss: how Baltimore went, how Denver went, and what you guys can expect from Salt Lake City, the Utah Archers homecoming weekend, which is the last one of the regular season, as I said, and then the big playoff push. Mike, how you doing?
I'm doing great, man. I was really happy with last week's episode with Christy from Cinegenics. Got in the weeds a little bit. You know, I like to talk about and learn from other executives in the space. So that was a really good episode for me personally. I enjoyed listening back to it, and I'm excited to talk about Baltimore, Denver, and Salt Lake. Like you said, a lot of interesting things going on in each of those markets. Salt Lake's really exciting. I'm going to be there. I know you're going to be traveling for work, but I'm going to be there and sort of dig in with one of our great partners there in the Utah Sports Commission, which is a great partner of ours. Going to be seeing some folks, some investors. We have a really good junior archers program that's burgeoning in that market. So Salt Lake is one of those markets, man, that is really up and coming that I'm excited about getting back into.
Yeah, I love Salt Lake. It's a special place for the PLL, from the history of us playing there to our championship series during the uh, global pandemic, to even last year on site,
That's right.
where we sell the thing out week over week, and we had, the king of sports ownership in the great state of Utah, and Ryan Smith came and watched the games, and so the community, from lacrosse fans to sports owners, show out in SLC, and it's going to be a lot of fun to be back.
I wonder if you look at like why Salt Lake has such great sports fans. Like I'm looking at our ticketing tracker, and we'll sell more tickets in Salt Lake than we would in Baltimore, right? And is it because we know Baltimore is an incredible lacrosse market? We know that there's tons of fans. Yes, this is the first time that the Utah Archers have come back to Utah, but if you think about, and this is something we always talk about, like different, every single state, every single city is different. And there's something different about those sports fans in different markets. And we're starting to be able to collect that data, but it's really interesting to be able to see how rabid these Utah fans are around their Utah Archers. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, but it's been interesting for me to track this. I mean, look, we were hurt with weather in Baltimore, right? So it's not a fair 1-to-1. We only get to go there once. Like we had torrential thunderstorms for both on Saturday and Sunday. We had to shut a game down because there was like a 3-hour downstorm. But and so that definitely affects tickets. But if you just look at where we are a week out, we're performing better in Utah than we all are in Baltimore. And it's just really interesting for me.
Well, there's a lot of variables. I think at a macro level, sports, what makes it fun is that it's part data, part romance, and we can do our best to capture as much data as possible, but in the end, we're talking about psychology of a sports fan and their relationship to their team, and whether the team is hot or not as well, how long the team has been in market, a fan, or they call it the community's access to a sport like lacrosse, which is still in its nascent stages of growing domestically and globally. So those are things where you make an educated guess. There's timing, right? Like when we first sold out Homewood Field, it was in June, right? And then for a number of reasons why we make that weekend very decorated is it's shifted over to August for PLL Junior Championships, for a Pro Lacrosse Hall of Fame, for network availability, right? For the past 2 years, it's had double ABCs. So we make decisions based off of data, off of trend, off of customer feedback, but you can look at the time of year, right? First week of August, people head on vacation before the school year starts. There's this notion in emerging markets, whether it's Denver, that has frankly been around for 15 to 20 years, when you talk about a heartbeat or a pulse of lacrosse fans and participants. You look at Colorado, you look at the Pacific Northwest in Seattle, you look at certain areas in Texas, SLC, There are a lot of reasons why the sports fan is really sticky in those particular markets. But the anecdotal feedback that we get is they are non-traditional lacrosse markets. So to have someone like Tom Schreiber and the Utah Archers, there are perennial top teams in the West, last year's champion, represent you. There's this supply demand curve that doesn't exist in Baltimore that has access to lacrosse for so long. So those are some of the factors, but none of them weigh proportionally in a direction to suggest that Baltimore doesn't perform as well as Denver or Salt Lake. There are these ebb and flows of our business model, which is why we sit around and discuss it all day, that are not one-to-one to a traditional trade association league and a home and away schedule. I had mentioned winning, right? That's a big piece too. In traditional sports leagues, they say the best way to sell out your venues is your team to be top of the table, right? And you see that consistently in the NBA, the NFL, and Major League Baseball. So all that stuff makes it more art than science, I think. And as we continue to build more name recognition at the league, team, and player level, you find more consistency.
Yeah, I mean, look, all that's right. We also only go to these markets, we only get one shot at it, right? And so that we don't get you get the weekend like you talked about. Like we've talked about this in this podcast a bunch, but like picking venues and the Tetris of the venue availability, and we have venues that we have really great relationships with, and we have relationships that we're building with certain venues, right? That take longer because they have other tenants that they have to fit in, right? And so that is part of the Tetris model, like you talked about. Is we used to be in Baltimore June, then moved it to August, and we got to evaluate if August is the right thing because at that local market, everyone the first week, if we know this from going to the DMV, goes to Ocean City or down to the shore, up to the shore down in North Carolina for vacation before school starts, right? Also, you're hit with weather, right? And it was like 100 degrees, and then we had thunderstorms both days. That's going to affect tickets. That said, we had to delay the game, the Whip Snakes homecoming game, the last game of the weekend on Sunday, about an hour and a half, and we had to vacate the because of the lightning. We had to vacate the entire stadium
After already moving it from
after
5:30
moving
to
it.
12:30. Yeah, the weekend was super challenging. I thought the crowd in the end was actually pretty awesome.
Oh, they came
Last
back. They
year,
fully came back. I don't think there was anyone that didn't come back. They went up to all the bars. They waited. They got their notifications on the app, and then they came back to the stadium. And I was just like flabbergasted that people came back for that. And that Whip Snakes fan base was loud and cheering the entire time, and they ended up beating the Cannons. Right? It was an epic game, and that mattered to those players. Right? And so I think that it's not a one-to-one comparison. To me, it's just interesting to see these markets where, originally we launched the Utah Archers. Everyone's like, Utah, that's not a lacrosse market. And it's becoming a lacrosse market, man. And I think it has to do with some of that, like you said, that supply and demand. We've been going there since 2020. People are starting to love the game. There's a great youth businesses there. University of Utah has a great men's lacrosse program, and it's building in that market, right? And it's really interesting and exciting to see.
yeah, I mean, the last point I'll make on Baltimore is it's a top market, it's a favorite market, it's our first market where we sold out. And, the other side of the coin of, okay, people take holiday in the beginning of August, and that's a challenge. Well, in June, we're challenged by all the club tournaments. So there's always a pro and con list that's being built. You know, Homewood has typically had night games for us as well, which is, I'm biased, but there's no better place to play under the lights than Homewood Field in college or pro lacrosse. And then when you get the ABC windows, what many people don't realize, and I figured this out on the job, is that your over-the-air broadcast networks, NBC, ABC, CBS, and Fox, they give you sports programming opportunities. And when I say give you, they give their network colleagues on the sports side, so call it NBC Sports Group or ESPN out of Disney, essentially a 4 to 5 hour window where you can go off as early as noon on a Saturday or Sunday, and you have to be off the air by 5. So when you see our PLL games on ABC, it's always a day game because that's when the sports teams at the respective networks are given an opportunity to go live. So when we get the double ABC, which is invaluable for the sport's growth and extended reach into new communities and casual fans, we're having to play on August 2nd in 100-degree weather on the turf. So there's always like a give and take in this, and hopefully that lets you all in on some of the inexact decisions that we have to make. But I thought our team did a really good job, and I'll make a note on the weather delay is for day one, we had them both days. For day one, we were able to get off the Carolina versus Utah game, which was fantastic. Back and forth, high scoring, then great defense. It started with a Blaze Reardon coast-to-coast goal, which many of us love thinking about that Blaze Reardon goal when he was with Albany against Cornell in the quarterfinals of the NCAA, or maybe it was the first round. It was just, this guy is perennially a top player in the world. And then you have the Schreiber goals, and it's just the accuracy and the flow of the game was amazing. We then have Thunder and Lightning that pushes the start of our second game, which, talking about that ABC window, there's no flexibility there. And that 2-hour window that we get is gold. So we sat as an executive team anticipating and going, okay, well, we're either going to potentially lose the 2 hours altogether and not get lacrosse on air, or what we can do is package up the prior game, which was fantastic and only on ESPN Plus for the ABC window. And then the third option was, well, we could start with the previously played game, and then if the Cannons game gets off against the Whips, then we can queue that up. But would that be confusing to an ABC fan, which you talk about major markets that probably aren't watching the first game on ESPN Plus to see one half of one game, one half of the other? So we made another art decision and said, hey, we knew we had a great game at 12:30. Let's just show that for the 2 o'clock window on ABC. And I think it was the right move. But those are things that we're doing live on site, which might feel really nuanced, but definitely business decisions and entertainment decisions that we're having with our partners at ESPN.
I mean, those decisions too, right? To take fans and people that are listening further into the foxhole, like those decisions are being made with time crunch, right? Like we have to go live at a certain time and we got to make a decision. We have partners of ours, sponsors of ours, like that are sitting there on the other side. We're in a war room. Next door, we have a meteorologist live on call that we're talking to, a service that we pay for. So we have direct access to the best information for weather. And we have to make a decision but before we go live on ABC in a compressed amount of time. And then you have to coordinate with tickets, fan experience, so the fans, right? You have to coordinate with lacrosse product, the players. You have to coordinate with broadcast to make sure they're good. Their people that are operating the cameras are good, right? And you have to coordinate with the rest of the staff. We have to do all of this within a compressed amount of time and try to make the best decision possible. And it was pretty stressful. But one of the things that we said was, like you said, we made the best decision. We think it was the right decision. And I'm just really proud of our team for, one of the values of the company is persevere through the noise, right? That's pretty noisy stuff to deal with. And we dealt with that really well. And we thought critically in the moment. We stayed calm. We're in the live events business. This stuff happens. Like, it's live events. How many musical fests have you been to where there's massive rain delays because, Dave Matthews can't go out and play because of lightning? It just happens, and you have to stay calm. You have to anticipate, and you have to continue to operate. And I'm just really proud of our team for doing so. And it builds up muscles. Like we have that muscle, and we know how to deal with it for the next time.
And there have been non-weather related decisions that we've made with our network partner around flexing games to TV. So, none of us could predict the way this season has gone, where you have the perennial sort of championship contending Philadelphia Water Dogs eliminated from the playoffs. And then you have last year's bottom two teams in the New York Atlas and Denver Outlaws right now at the top. We have attachment to cities for the first time. We have two conferences for the first time. Our lacrosse product group, which Andrew Sinnenberg, Rachel DeCecco, Andrew Manning, Seth Tierney, Joel White do a great job of working cross-functionally with the other business units around these types of decisions. But we hear from ESPN every Monday or Tuesday and go, this Utah-Denver matchup that maybe wasn't looking great in Charlotte in week 2 because people weren't sure if Denver was even going to get past 3 wins. These are the top 2 teams in the West right now. Maybe we should flex that game to television. And you go, oh, okay, cool. Can we work that out with our travel coordinators, with our practice schedules, to your point, letting our fans know? So we've done that a few times this year seamlessly. And with that, I want to talk a little bit about the playoffs, because there was a California-Philadelphia game in Denver that was, let's face it, 2 teams at the bottom of both conferences. One of them, however, is still technically in the playoff hunt, and they needed to win in overtime, and that was the California Redwoods. So as I look at playoff formation that's going to happen across both the East and the West this weekend in Salt Lake, it's a really exciting time. Then you and I want to chop it up on who qualifies for Champ Series based on that. But here's why it's exciting. The California Redwoods are going after the Carolina Chaos final spot in the playoffs. So right now, the Chaos are the 6th team in. Water Dogs are out. All right, why can the Redwoods go after that? Well, because they're 3-6 and the Chaos are 4-5. So if the Redwoods win, they go to 4-6, and the Chaos lose, they go to 4-6. We're going to find that out right away, Friday night, okay? So California has a pretty daunting task. They have to beat the Utah Archers, number 1. Number 2, they have to beat them by a lot. So if you look at the score differential, which is the number 1 deciding factor for a playoff tie, they have a score differential right now, the Redwoods, of -31. Carolina Chaos, -9. So here's what has to happen. California has to beat Utah by probably, call it, 11 goals. And then the Boston Cannons have to beat later in that evening on Friday, the Carolina Chaos, by 11 goals. Now, that could fluctuate, right? California could go off and win by 15, and then Boston only win by 7. But if 11 and 11 happens in that sequence, the Redwoods are in and the Chaos are out. We've seen some blowouts this year, more than we've ever seen in the past, so I wouldn't rule that off the table. Now, if you move to the next game or the next day of games, you have the New York Atlas, Philadelphia Water Dogs starting out, and then you have the Denver Outlaws and the Utah Archers finishing it. So if Friday happens the way that I said, in a crazy change of events, then the Cannons will have now a score differential of 23, and they'll have moved potentially into first place. If the Atlas lose to the Water Dogs by more than 5 goals, which we're not anticipating, but if they do, then the Cannons leapfrog the Atlas, and they become the number 1 team in the East, getting that really anticipated bye. Utah could lose to the California Redwoods, giving them a shot at the playoffs, and still get the number 1 seed in the West because they played the Denver Outlaws the following day. So I know this is like a lot of scenarios, and we'll probably create some graphics that'll go out on social that you guys can follow. But the sequencing of these games is really interesting. Utah could lose the first night and not be out of the number 1 seed contention because they play Outlaws the second night. And then if all of that stuff happens where California beats Utah, Boston beats Carolina, Philadelphia beats New York, and Utah beats Denver, then you would have a Cannons and Utah bye at the top, and you would have a championship series of Utah, Denver, New York, and Boston Whipsnakes out. So there is every game matters this weekend, short to say, which is pretty exciting. Now, if Friday goes the opposite direction where Utah beats California and Carolina beats Boston, then Saturday's games matter less. Does that track?
Yeah, that tracks. I mean, you have good math brain on that. I think for me, one of the things that I'm really interested in tracking, obviously, that bottom race between the Redwoods and the Carolina Chaos is really important. I think I'm tracking, for me, that'll be something to watch. I'm also tracking, can the Atlas stay hot heading into the playoffs? Are going to want to, right? The Cannons are coming off that loss to the Whipsnakes. They're going to want to try to finish strong, right? And then can the Outlaws stay hot? That home crowd with with the Outlaws really lifted them, and they were able to play an amazing game and really pull out in the second half. Can they stay hot when they're not in their home market, right? And then the Champ Series to me is something really interesting. You hear more and more, we talk to these coach GMs, how they really want to make the championship series because it provides more of a 365 cohesiveness. They're able to practice, they're able to get together during that month, play together, play meaningful games, keep their roster together, meet more. I mean, you look at someone like Coach Holman, who took that really, really seriously last year, and that was a goal that he set, right, with his team. He's like, we want to make the championship series so we can have more connectivity throughout the 365 year. He took it really seriously. He brought in like a couple like Navy SEALs. He brought in yoga instructors during those weeks and was like really investing in his team and their culture and their DNA. And I think that matters. I mean, obviously these players are making more money. There's big bonuses for them to win the Champ Series, but that cohesiveness and strategy you're seeing from these coach GMs to be like, hey, this makes our team stronger. We're going to have more connectivity in the winter. And this is just going to be like spring, summer. This is going to be like more of a 365 approach. To me, is something that you're seeing these coaches talk more about and these players really striving to do. So I'm really watching, anticipating who that Champ Series lineup is going to be, who the top 4 teams are going to be this week.
Yeah, I mean, I love it for 2 reasons. It's the Olympic format, and we all saw an amazing Olympics over the last 2.5 weeks in Paris. Take a look at the men's basketball final was watched by 20 million people in the U.S., which was a record viewership audience. That's more than the NBA finals gets. And, you know, there's billions of people that watch the Olympics globally. So lacrosse is next in LA. You saw the passing of the flag to Tom Cruise, who took it around the world and landed in Santa Monica, California for a concert with Billie Eilish and Dr. Dre and Snoop Dogg and the Chili Peppers. But that momentum around the Olympics, it felt like it was the 90s. And that type of like pre-financial crisis, like comeback to across industries is getting stronger and stronger. I mean, the 90s was a time where lacrosse was going, you know, we were growing not only participation at a clip that essentially paused in the mid 2000s. We're seeing it again now. But it was growing at a clip. Viewership was growing at a clip. Attendance was growing at a clip greater than any other time in American history. And so to have lacrosse back in the Olympics in this 6s format, rugby 7s is an example of what that discipline does to get into the Olympics. It's going to be awesome. And I think our championship series will be more meaningful as a result because all these guys playing or attempting to compete know that this is a roster that they are going to be dogged in trying to make in a short few years. So that's number 1. And then number 2, as you know, just call it what it is a championship. And there's not many opportunities as pro athletes where you can hoist a trophy. And when we think about bringing that championship more and more to the forefront, it's incumbent on us to storytell. It's incumbent on more Brian Holmans and Boston Cannons lifting that trophy. Example of storytelling is the Cannons will have the first opportunity in 2024 to win a double, or you call it a brace, which people who watch global football would know that, you know, if you win 2 championships in a year, it goes down in history. You know, if you win the FA Cup and the Premier League and the Champions League, that's a treble. Not many people do that. And the Cannons have an opportunity to win a brace, and they'd be the first team to have done that. You start thinking about the connectivity and what it means, and that builds more excitement, in my opinion, around the championship series. So all of that will unlock after this weekend. Shall we get into some questions?
Do the questions.
I think we have 3 good ones.
Hello there. My name is Simon. I'm calling to you from Denver, Colorado. I am wondering if the Denver Outlaws currently are the same franchise as the old Outlaws, or if they are the Chrome rebranded as the Denver Outlaws. To me, it seems like the PLL is marketing them as the old Outlaws with all the old history and not just a rebrand. So I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on that. I know it's kind of a confusing question, but just looking for some insight. Thanks.
Cool. Well, I appreciate that question. It is a complex question that you were aiming at, so don't view it as confusing. I'll give you rationale, but the short of it is actually both. It's yes to a rebrand, and yes to, because of that rebrand, an account of history of one of the most storied franchises in professional lacrosse. So a chrome team composition is only part of the change to the Denver Outlaws. Also not uncommon in sports. Think of it this way: from sports league precedent as number one to pro lacrosse history as number two. So let's start with precedent. Typically, in the NFL or the NBA and other leagues, you have franchises beginning in specific locations where history indicates that those teams can either one, move, and two, move with a name change. So most recently in the NFL, LA Rams from St. Louis, Las Vegas Raiders from Oakland, and then the OGs, at least growing up in the Maryland market, would know the Indianapolis Colts from Baltimore. But I think the best example is in the NBA. So the Charlotte Hornets were a team in the late 80s that relocated to New Orleans. And then it was the New Orleans Hornets before they changed their name to the New Orleans Pelicans. Later on, the Charlotte Hornets were granted a new franchise from scratch. They started with a new name, the Charlotte Bobcats. Then enter Michael Jordan as the owner said, hey, let's reclaim the OG name of the Hornets. So with the reclaim of the Charlotte Hornets, they were able to tell the history of that franchise dating back to its formation in the 80s. And the New Orleans Pelicans is actually the substantive team that was the former Charlotte Hornets and relocated. So I say that example because probably the chrome team composition, which many might think is now the Denver Outlaws, there was a rename into that market to reclaim its history. So context for me in sports is everything. Storylines of leagues, teams, and players. We got this one right by what we learned last weekend. Brendan O'Neill, he said he was biased, but it was the best crowd he's played against. Eric Law got to come back to talk about reclaiming one of the team's storied players. And I think we were able to do this, if I shift to point two and talking about pro lacrosse history. Buying the MLL did two big things for us. It gave us IP that's really valuable. Think Boston Cannons, think Denver Outlaws. And it gave us the ability to unlock historicals. So the context is everything in sports, where our Cash App Championship trophy that's built by Tiffany has the MLL championships all the way through the PLL champions listed on there. So you're able to reclaim historical champions, historical stats, and things like we did in Baltimore coming up to the top of this podcast with our Pro Lacrosse Hall of Fame. So when we expanded to 8 teams, the Cannons Lacrosse Club, before the Boston Cannons, were an expansion draft team. So that was more foundational. And then when we went geo-base, we knew that Denver was a critical market for us to be in. And with the power of that team dating back to 2006 and the conditioned fandom, did it make sense to go the Denver Chrome? You know, a lot of people think like, oh, they got relegated because they were the worst team, or they're maybe like branding relegated because the team is still there. That's not it. It was more about you guys, the fans, and learning from the game's, frankly, the prior league successes, which mostly lived in Denver and in Boston. So not all MLL teams were created equal. That's why it's the New York Atlas and the Maryland Whipsnakes versus the New York Lizards and the Chesapeake Bayhawks. It's not to say that the Bayhawks and the Lizards won't come back at some point in the future, but hopefully that answers your question. Covered a lot of ground there, from sports precedent and history across pro sports leagues to where we think we were able to get it right.
Hey, Paul and Mike. First of all, just thank you for this podcast and what you're doing for the league. My name is Grayson. I'm from Pennsylvania, and as an athletic trainer, I was just curious about some of the medical side of the PLL. So my primary questions are, what does on-site coverage look like each weekend, and what's available to the players? And then how are injuries managed and treated throughout the week when they're not with their team or their respective athletic trainer, for example. And then if also you could just elaborate on what the Stedman and Howard Head relationships look like. Thanks, and have a great day.
All right, I'll take this one first. So Grayson, what's up, man? Thanks for this. I think you also mentioned your athletic trainer. So you're doing a lot of really great, gritty work that's really valued by our players, and I'll tell you why. So first, on the relationship side, Stedman is our official medical partner. And then Howard Head is our official physical therapy partner, right? They have a relationship. Both are HQ'd in Vale area. And we were originally connected to Stedman Group. And then they were able to connect us to Howard Head. And we have a great relationship with both. How it works on site specifically is so every weekend we have doctors on site, either Stedman or fellows of Stedman are there for anything that happens that oversee sort of the operation. And then each team has its own personal athletic trainer, ATC, and that's via the Stedman network. So they're plugged in to the overall holdco of the Stedman group. And that is specific to the roster. They travel. They're specific only to that team. They receive a ring if that team wins a championship. They're very much part of that team and that organization. And then there's Howard Head. Howard Head is a separate entity, our physical therapy partner, but is really involved in a couple things: player rehab, preparing, recovering. If there is an injury, they are very, very involved in the rehab process, making sure that on site, whether it's soft tissue or recovery, they're getting all the things they need to prepare. No matter what team they're on, they have their own room that's all for recovery, stretching, healing, rehab. At each facility that we're at, they have their own designated area. It's really, really valuable. They have their own products. They travel about 3 or 4 people each weekend, and it's pretty incredible. I've even gone in there when I'm tensed up, and the players are done right before a game. I'll get a little chiropractic work, and it's fantastic. As far as offsite goes, when we're not on site, we have a really, really great system that's overseen by sort of the Stedman group, but also our lacrosse product team, right? And so whether there's an injury that needs work, the ATC will work with Stedman because they're all part of that same network. And no matter where the players live, also with Howard Head, they will make sure that if they are not in the Denver, Colorado Vale area, they have access to their network. So whether it's network hospitals or rehab facilities or physical therapy facilities, they have pretty broad networks because these are such great partners, and the players are able to go there. If there's an injury that and the player wants to, and the player requires surgery, we fly the player to Vale. Hopefully, if they opt into that and they want to get that surgery at the Stedman clinic, and they'll get their surgery by best-in-class sports surgeons. Paul's had 2 knee surgeries there, and by best-in-class folks there that he can speak more specifically to. But that's essentially how it works, the nuts and bolts, and hopefully that answers the question. Paul, I don't know if there's anything else you want to add on that.
No, I mean that was organized really well and explained really well. The 2 things that I'll add to it is speaking from a league standpoint. And one of the reasons why we're single entity and touring is we're able to get things like this that are mission critical right and consistent and equal across all 8 teams and players. And that's rare. It's one of the most expensive line items in sports. People don't realize it, especially when it comes to contact sports. There are very few providers out there that you can strike deals with that won't put the company entirely in red. And we didn't even address workers' comp, which is a part of, the mandate of how you can and if you can even run a sports league from a business standpoint. These guys are hitting each other. There's soft tissue issues. There's ligament issues. There's fracture issues across bone. And so to have a relationship like this with Stedman and Howard Head that's both proactive and reactive is so important. I would say quickly on Mike's front with the double knee surgery, I want to give a shout out to Matt Preventure, who was my surgeon, and then Nate Neff, who's on site most of the time with the PLL. Howard Head and the PLL. Nate was my physio and still offers a lot of counsel and support. But there are some nuances, again, not too dissimilar. I'll use an example. If any of you guys watch Dynasty, but you didn't have to watch Dynasty to know that Tom Brady has a PT business. And his partner is this guy, Alex Guerrero. And Alex is a really sharp physio. And he has a bespoke relationship with Tom. A lot of athletes that are aspiring to play for 10 to 15 years, they build a bespoke relationship. My S&C was Jay Dyer, who's not an official S&C of the PLL, but he works as an S&C with a lot of our athletes. And so what happens is a Howard Head physio, in some cases, will communicate with an athlete's version of Alex Guerrero in between games to make sure that they're dialed in and aligned on protocol. So that happens in the PLL, it happens in the NFL and the NBA. And, I think that's important to be malleable to a player's priorities.
Hi, Mike and Paul. My name's Jackson. I'm a big fan of the PLL. Started watching it in 2021. My question is, so I'm a accounting major in college right now. Just kind of looking in the careers with accounting in sports. What advice do you have with connecting with individuals, people to reach out to and network with? Thank you so much, and thank you for letting me support the PLL.
What's up, Jackson? I'll take a first stab at this. So great question. Love that you're an accounting major. Accounting is one of those skills that is with you for life. So great job picking out a great major that can be a useful skill for you no matter what you do. Whether you're a marketer, whether you're in sales, having an understanding of accounting can be really, really beneficial as you want to own a P&L, if you want to own a P&L one day for your respective business units. So love that you're doing that. As far as advice for getting into sports, I would start this way. So first, if you really want to work in sports, that's great. Know that it's at times very, very fun. And then at times it's very, very grueling. And I'll tell you why it's grueling. You don't get weekends off a lot of times. A lot of people are like, Monday through Friday, weekend, I kick the feet up, I turn off my phone and my computer, and I don't check emails. That is not the case in sports. So just know what you're getting into, that there is a 365 nature to it. Now, when you're out of season, you don't have to be on call as much on the weekends, but things happen, right? And you still need to be accountable. And so I would just, really, anyone that's thinking about getting into sports, know that there is a large part of the job that requires you to be on more so than if you were just doing if you're working at a big three accounting firm, let's say. The second piece I think you asked was around connecting with folks. How do you get into this space? This is how I would think about it if I'm in your shoes. So I'm a big fan of a couple of things. One, working at a big company and working at a startup for a couple of reasons. When you're first out of school, I think it's important to build corporate hygiene, right? And really understand how big companies work. You start to build this skill set around how to present in front of folks, how you work cross-functionally with different folks, and you really build and understand how big companies operate from an inside track. And then if you go work at a startup, you start wearing a lot of different hats. Those things still apply: how to work well cross-functionally, how to present in front of your colleagues in a thoughtful way, how to have great work product. But you're able to take a lot of those skills when it's a little bit lower stakes at a big company, when you don't have to wear as many hats, and when it's higher stakes because you only have a limited amount of time and have to wear a lot of hats at a smaller company, and then apply. And those types of companies actually exist in sports. And so what I would say from your perspective, I would think about an internship, right? I would focus less on the sport. I would focus less on where it is geographically, and I would focus on where can you go and can you figure out if this is a place that you want to be a part of, or their culture. Are you going to be able to learn some skills? Are you going to be able to work for great human beings? It's something you should evaluate. Do you want to be a part of that organization and the people that are running it? And I would think if you can get in your shoe in the door, which you can, from an internship perspective, a lot of sports organizations hire a lot of interns. We do that. We hire over 40 interns every summer, and they'll do anything from helping selling tickets to helping thinking about sponsorship strategy to doing grassroots marketing, et cetera, right? Social media. And whatever it is, don't be too picky. Just try to get your foot in the door and learn from that internship. And there, take a step back and understand, how was that? How did it feel working in sports? Was that the right organization, whether it was big or small? And where do you want to go from there? And take that opportunity when you're an intern to actually network inside of that organization, right? So when you're there, talk to people, ask people if you can grab 10 minutes on a Zoom call or a 10-minute coffee, and just really spend time asking them questions. Some of the best interns we've had, we've ended up hiring full-time. It's one of my favorite things that we're able to do and lucky enough to do, is take great interns who do great work, and they become such an important part that it's like we need them for the future, right? And they're the first people we go to when we have an open entry-level job. And so you can either get into that organization because you were an outstanding intern, or you can take that skill set and then start looking in the sports ecosystem because you've already started working in sports as an intern. So that would be my advice. I know that was a bit of a word salad, but I thought it's important to give you all that different web. And then as far as reaching out to people, use LinkedIn. I try to respond to all my LinkedIn messages and just hit people up, and then talk specifically and really research the company you're reaching out to. Just a cold LinkedIn isn't going to do it. You really got to understand who you're reaching out to, understanding what new sort of blue flame ideas you might have that may not have thought of, and maybe provide some value of a suggestion in your outreach. So that would be my thoughts there for you, Jackson. Paul, I don't know what you got, if you have anything.
Yeah, I'll jump off what you said around internships. So Allie Fowler started as an intern at the PLL, and then she worked on the marketing side. Now she's our chief of staff. All three of the areas that she's been a part of at the PLL require different skill sets. I would zoom out and say, okay, look, Mike, you majored in government, right? I was a political science major, business process quality management minor. I would ask the question, if I were you, what's more important, sports or accounting? It's great that you got that skill set, to Mike's point, but if it is accounting, then that would dictate your route to getting your first job or internship. If it's sports and, oh, by the way, I have this unique skill set in accounting, then I think, to Mike's point, you just go out and do whatever you can to get into sports. And then at some point you'll find yourself on the finance side of the house. So that's part one. Trying to add value off of the way that Mike went through his answers. I can talk a little bit to networking and how I have used it as it developed that skill, I should say, over my career. It's been really important for me as I've developed. I've never approached networking with an outcome mindset. Meaning I don't reach out to someone knowing that, like, hey, I want to work for them, or I hope that they can do this for me, or maybe they'll, contribute capital to an idea that we have for a company. I do it out of pure interest and connection. And for me, right, I love sports. I love ESPN and media. I like filmmaking and producing and writing. And I learned that I wanted to do podcasting, and I would reach out to leaders in those respective businesses, mostly for an opportunity to learn. Now, to be honest, I was able to secure a lot of those meetings because of what I was able to accomplish in lacrosse. So pretty early on, my resume got me in the door. But if you don't have a resume of being, a USA lacrosse player, err on the side of what I think is really important, people who I take meetings with. Preparation, they're thorough, they're inquisitive, they're respectful of scheduling, and they're highly mobile, right? So if you're going to reach out to someone who you find and think is important and you want to learn from, you better be able to get on a plane, on a train, or in a car. Being persistent and helpful are key. And I would say the secret sauce is, and this is a part of critical thinking, which is a core value at the PLL, is finding a mutual relationship. One of the things that I think about quite a bit, and there's a Harvard case study that I read years ago that underlines the notion that we're all just one phone call away. And the way they bring this to life is an overarching criteria throughout this HBS class is who can book a meeting with the President of the United States. And you think, no fucking way. But over time, if you're critical enough in thought and you reach out and you build network and you have that preparation, thoroughness, and inquisition, you have respect and you're mobile, every class someone lands it. And I found that tapping into your relationship, whether your parents or your brother or your friends or your community, you will be shocked, but you're always one call away. And that's how I approach networking.
Oh, that's it for our questions. We got a great weekend coming up here in Salt Lake. We talked about all the implications. I think hopefully this podcast is great for everyone. It was great for us to hopefully answer some questions. I know Paul and I take a lot of pride in being able to be there for everyone based on these questions and provide our insights. Not that we have all the answers, but we're just providing you guys what we know. And I'm just really excited for this upcoming weekend. I'm feeling grateful for the season. I can't believe it goes by so fast. We talk about that. We talk about how fast it goes, and we have to make every weekend count, every game count on behalf of the players and our fans. And that's really what we're focused on. So I'm sad that Paul's not going to be there with me this weekend. He's traveling for work, always grinding, always networking, like he's talking about, helping build this business. But I'll be there. Paul, any last imparting words from you?
New York Atlas and Maryland Whipsnakes have been the only teams to go 2-0 in their homecoming. Most of the other teams have gone 1-1, except for the Philadelphia Water Dogs, who heartbreakingly have lost so many one-goal games. If the Utah Archers, with an amazing home crowd we know they'll have, go 2-0, they will secure the number 1 seed in the West, and that first round bye. Strap in. It's going to be an awesome playoff season.